This is Bumping Into, where we have interesting conversations with people from all walks of life.
Hi everybody, welcome to the show. This week on Bumping Into, I bump into Greg Ford, the founder of the iconic Queensland business Trade Tools. For those listeners either not in Queensland or not into trade, Trade Tools is a collection of specialty tool shops. There are over 270 staff across almost 20 stores and turning over more than $200 million a year. What initially drew me to Trade Tools and Greg's story was the fact that their model is built on sustainable business practices. It's a low debt formula. It's got a key focus on providing a happy workplace for their staff and a big focus on customer service. There isn't an obsession with the lowest price and shaving margins, pushing staff purely just to get turnover. So it does go in stark contrast to a lot of other businesses that seemingly look successful for a short period of time. As you'll hear in the story, this business was built back in the 1980s, and Greg still manages to manufacture a lot of their Renegade range here in Australia. And it's very important to Greg and the brand that there is still Australian manufacturing taking place. This is a great story about a family-run business straight from the founder himself. So what I wanted to do is go back to before you came here, the story of how you came.
Well, I was basically a school dropout. I left school when I was 16. And we're talking in the 1960s, you see. Oh, okay. So everyone went for a bit of a wander around. Well, I did anyway. And I went wandering around the world as a hippie. So there's pictures up there of me in India and places like that.
Oh, geez, okay. That would have been a big 1960 travelling through.
Yeah, well, that was in the early 70s, that was. And I ended up in Australia. It seemed like a good place to go. I was just 21 when I came here. And I wanted to go to Canada, but they wouldn't let me in with a work visa. So I found out that I could get into Australia because I had a British passport. So I just turned up here because it seemed like the right thing to do, and it was getting cold in Europe. So I came here. And I spent 4 or 5 years wandering around Australia, going to Indonesia. I went back to the UK once. I went overland from Darwin to London. And then I met a lot of Aussies and came back. And I started getting homesick for Australia, so I came back here permanently in 1977. Jeez. And I got a job centre in real estate on Sydney's North Shore. You know.
Yeah, prime spot.
As you do, yeah. I know, it was interesting times. As an interesting aside, I bought my first house at the end of 1977 with a deposit which was a personal loan, and I actually lied to the bank to get that, and that was the 10% deposit. And myself and my girlfriend, she later became my wife, we bought a house for what was then 3.5 times the average annual Australian wage. And that same house now is worth 15 times the average annual Australian wage. So things for young people were a lot easier back in the 70s than they are now, you know. Anyway, my mum and dad, my dad's Welsh, and he knew that I was living in Australia, and he thought he wouldn't mind living in a warmer climate. And then he got fired when he was 55 years old, because that was the rules back then when he worked for a company called Crown Forklifts. And he'd been in the tool industry all his life. And so they came to Australia in 1978, and the old man got a job in a tool company in Sydney, which is, he'd been in the tool industry all his life, you see. And he did quite well, actually. And they bought a house. They sold a house in the UK, and they bought a house in Sydney. And then house prices virtually doubled in 2 years. So on paper, we'd made quite a bit of money out of the house that we bought and the house that he'd bought. And then he said, why don't we sell these houses and move to Queensland, because he'd been here on holiday, and I knew Queensland reasonably well, because I lived in the 1975, I lived in a hippie commune at Palm Cove in North Queensland. So I thought, I wouldn't mind going to Queensland, and everyone was sort of migrating to Queensland. So we decided to come to Queensland and open a tool company. And my name is Greg, obviously. His name is Len, he's dead now. So we combined the name Greg and Len, and we started a company called Glenford's.
Yep.
Which we had for 5 years, and then he got homesick and he wanted to go back to his native Wales. So we sold that company and we all went back to the UK. And he bought a hotel and it was quite successful. And he made a lot of money out of that. And I went back to the UK and I couldn't stand the weather. So after about a couple of years, I said, I'm sick of this. So we went back, myself and my wife. And after 2 years, I said, I can't stand it here any longer. You know, I want to go back to Queensland. So I came back to Queensland and he put his hotel on the market and sold it. And he came back here to retire. I didn't know what else to do, so I started another tool company. And I called it Queensland Trade Tools. And that was in 1987. And it was primarily because I didn't know what else to do. It was the only trade that I'd really got to know, if you can call it a trade. And I had a couple of mates that were with us that used to work for us at the old company Glenfords that weren't doing very well. One of them was an alcoholic. So we started a store in Capalaba and I gave them all a job. So it was really, we started Queensland Trade Tools in order to give myself and my mates a job. And nothing's changed. That's all we've ever done. And they say, do not employ your friends. Well, that's all I've ever done. So we just kept employing people that we knew.
Wow.
And that was in 1987. And I think our turnover for the first year was $700,000. And our turnover this year would be not far off 200 million.
But even back then, that's a lot of money.
Well, not really, no. No, it wasn't. Not in this industry.
Really?
Yeah. Well, we did all right, you know. And, you know, we all had ponytails and drove around in V8s and, you know, used to drink beer after work and all that sort of stuff. And then after about a year or two, it started to get a bit serious. Now, turnover started to climb, so we started to actually run it like a proper company. And one of those, out of those original three guys, there was myself, a guy called Peter Barrett. Unfortunately, he died. He was an alcoholic. And a fellow called Rick Stewart. Rick Stewart is retired, but his son is now a managing director.
Oh, right.
So it's very much a family business, you know.
Yeah, so you still keep all those close ties.
Yeah, and we've actually got people working here that worked for me and my dad in Glenfords in the early 1980s. One guy, Dave Cooper, is still here, and he's been working for me on and off for 41 years. He joined us when he was 17, and he's now, I think, 58 or something. So one thing we do, we tend to employ people that we know. Yeah. Just to backtrack slightly, I worked for a very, very clever Jewish guy for a year in London when I was 20, and he actually ran an estate agents. And I had a Jewish girlfriend at the time. Her name was Felicity. And she gave me, well, she actually wasn't Jewish, but her stepfather was. And she gave me a Star of David typing, which is the Star of David, which is, of course, on the flag of Israel. And I went for a job interview, and the guy there, I didn't realise they were all Jews, but the guy there thought I was Jewish because he saw my Star of David typing, so he gave me a job, you see. So in real estate in a very expensive part of London called Notting Hill. And I met all these incredible Australians. One of them, I'm pretty sure, was Screw Turner, the guy that started Flight Centre. I'm sure it was him. He was driving me around in a V12 Jaguar. We were looking for a flat for him to buy. And they kept telling me about how good Australia was, so that was one of the reasons I came here. I was only 20. And so, you know, the Star of David typing got me the job. Met all these Aussies that all lived in West London, near Earl's Court, which was called Kangaroo Valley, you know. And so I thought, I'll go and try Australia for a bit. I came here for a year and I'm still here. And that was in 1973. So where was I? Anyway, getting back to Queensland Trade Tools, started in 87. I think we opened our fourth store in 1992, which we've still got. And now we've got 17 stores, 2 that we don't own that belong to friends of ours. We're about to open a 20th store. Everyone at Trade Tools is always paid commission on the previous week's turnover, and that's the reason our staff tend to stay. Our average staff tenure is 8 years, nearly, and that's the highest of any sales organisation that I know. So we just creep, you know, we creep along. We're old-fashioned. We never borrow money. Never borrow money.
Never.
No, we've only ever borrowed money once, which was to buy this particularly large building, and we paid that back in a year. But we only ever expand if we've got the cash in the bank, and we only ever expand if we can buy a building freehold, and we fill it full of stock from money that we've already earned. So we never have any borrowings at all.
So you're never going backwards to catch up. You're
No.
always moving forward when the time's
Yep.
right.
Yep. I want to make sure that we're secure, and if there's ever a major downturn, Trade Tools is very rarely affected. In fact, I've been in business now for 42 years. I have never, ever put anyone off because of a downturn.
And you've weathered a few, because you had the one in the 90s, the recession of the 90s, and then we had the GFC.
Yeah.
So that's two big cannonballs that have
We
come
had
at
one
you.
in the early 1990s. There was a very severe softening of building activity in the mid-1990s. In actual fact, property prices went down. There was the implosion at the end of the 1990s. There's been quite a few mini recessions in the construction industry. In fact, there was quite a bad one after the GFC, and it was one of the severest I've ever seen.
Yeah.
But our figures only went down by about 10%.
Wow.
Yeah.
And with no debt.
No,
worries.
doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I mean, we own all our buildings, so we don't pay any rent.
Yeah. So
You
is
know?
that part of the thing? The whole strategy is you turn up, you buy it, you own it.
Yeah.
And then that way you're not beholden
All the
to
buildings,
someone's rent.
apart from two, which we've leased, one of them we've leased for 30 years. I've tried to buy it, but the guy said no. All the buildings that we occupy, we own outright, including others that we own now that used to be trade tool stores, and we moved to bigger premises and we've just kept them. So we've got this huge property portfolio.
So if you go back to that point, you've had the first shop, you've got enough capital to do a second shop. At what point, was it 4 shops, 5 shops in, where you thought, we're okay now, we're on a roll, everything is just going to keep this progression? Or was there ever that going home and thinking, oh shit, what's this, what's that, and stressing, did the stress turn off and the comfort crept in at X shops?
No, I'm not really an empire builder. I've got no interest in that, I don't need to stroke my ego in that regard. If ever we've got excess cash in the bank through accumulated profits, and it's easy to do if you have no debt and you own all of your buildings. It's the oldest trick in the book.
Yeah.
You own everything, you don't lease anything, you don't expand until you've got the cash to do it. And then it is the miracle of compound interest. Things just accumulate. And so, we have a competitor, for instance, not far up the road from here, where they've got a premises where they're paying $5,000 a week rent. We're just round the corner. We just pay the rates. So we're $5,000 a week in front from the moment we open the door on Monday morning.
And that's a lot.
It's a huge amount of money. Yeah. So we're virtually unbreakable. We're as unbreakable as we can be. And it's the old story, you can build a hut out of straw, or one out of mud, or one out of bricks. We built trade tools out of bricks. We've got a huge property portfolio.
Yeah.
And that is, we're virtually unbreakable.
And other states, has that ever been to do the whole Victoria, New South Wales?
Yeah, we've just about got Queensland covered now. And we're a bit lazy in that regard. We try not to open stores that are too difficult to manage. Now what we're planning to do is head down the coast of New South Wales.
Okay.
We've got a store in Tweed Heads, and we're looking to open one in Ballina, and then probably Grafton, Coffs Harbour, Port Macquarie.
So do that stepping
We
down.
do very well in regional areas. Almost half of the product that we sell, we import directly ourselves. In the last financial year, we unloaded the equivalent of 700 20-foot containers.
Wow.
We've got containers being unloaded every day, all day. So over 40% of everything that you buy from a trade tool store has got our own brand, Renegade Industrial, on it, or else is imported and is exclusive to us. And a lot of that stuff is the sort of stuff that rural people buy, especially farmers. So we do extremely well in regional areas. Our Toowoomba store is one of our strongest stores. We've got a Cairns store. So we like going into regional centres.
Yeah.
And that's where our aim is probably going to be over the next 10 years, to open more stores in regional areas, because we've been very successful when we've done it.
And that's probably, I suppose a lot of other people would see that as, no, I want to stick right in the heart of where everything is. Where you sort of, I'll go this way and capture the market share.
Well, it's the old adage, isn't it? I mean, if you're a baker and you want to open a new bakery, you go to a town with no good bakeries. You don't go to a town with 3 good bakeries already,
Yeah.
It's so simple, but people sort of they don't see it.
Yeah.
I mean, we have competitors that come and open stores just round the corner from us, thinking they're going to steal our customers, and then they wonder why they don't.
Yeah.
And I said to one of my competitors years ago, I said, I'm not out to steal your customers, but you're out to steal mine.
Yeah.
If you come near me, you might take 10% of my business. But if ever I open near you, I'll steal half of your customer base. And in the last 2 or 3 years, we've done it to 2 of their stores. We've told them we're going to open a trade tool store long before they've opened their own store. They haven't listened. They've opened a store, sold it to a franchisee. We've opened a store, and at least in one case in Cairns, they closed the store within a few months. They couldn't compete because they can't compete with our business model.
Jesus.
And the other thing is, we have a lot of people here that are shareholders.
Yeah.
If you have worked for Trade Tools for 10 years, which is a long time, and we've decided that the rest of the shareholders have decided that we want to keep you in the mix, we give you a bonus which allows you to buy shares in Trade Tools.
Yeah.
So we've now got 27 original shareholders who have shares that would virtually make them almost millionaires each. The shares are that valuable.
Wow.
And we have another tranche of shares which takes us up to 51 shareholders. A lot of those are later shareholders, and that means that they not only stay in the business, but they've got skin in the game. So in almost every store that you go into, you will meet someone in that store that owns a part of Trade Tools. So it's been spread around, and that gives us another form of foundation that our competitors generally don't have.
Yeah. Because you've knocked back the franchise model.
Yeah. Wouldn't suit us. Yeah, wouldn't suit us.
So, and is there a reason why? I mean,
I don't think franchising in this industry works.
Yeah.
I've never seen it work. I've seen it tried. There's one large company that does it. I don't think it's a particularly successful model. They don't seem to do too bad at it. Although that company's recently been taken over, and I would suspect that the new owners will probably try and buy some of those franchises back. Franchising in this industry doesn't work. In fact, franchising in a lot of industries doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So you've got, roughly, I think, was it 250 staff?
Yeah, a bit more than that, about 270.
270 staff.
Yeah.
So obviously there's no doubt the model and the feeling is very customer service based. That's the huge thing there. And like, you can walk into anywhere, and if you get a bad bank teller, well, they don't really have them anymore, but bad whatever, it can do a lot of damage. That one interaction, you'd be like, well, stuff them, I move on. So how hard is it to find 270 people that understand that culture? And that's a lot of personalities.
It's not easy, and it's become harder as the years have rolled on. We do tend to attract a reasonably high level of person when they find out how we run this company, that we're debt free, we own all our buildings. If you've been here long enough, you get offered shares. Everyone in this company is paid a weekly commission on the previous week's turnover. So if the company does well, everyone does well. If we do badly, everyone does badly. We might have 2 bad weeks a year and 50 really good ones. And sometimes we double our figures. Wow. So, our staff generally earn a lot more than they would if they worked elsewhere doing a similar job. That's one of the reasons they stay. So, we spread the love around. It works, Yeah. And, I've been accused of being too generous in the past, but I've done quite well out of it. So I'm not in it for the money, really. I'm in it for the fact that, we run a business and everyone's involved. We've got customers to look after. We have a public service to do in terms of the tool industry, as my father used to say, the world's second oldest industry, selling tools. And, we try and do the right thing by everyone. And that includes suppliers, customers and staff.
Yeah.
Because you can't have one without the other. All this about the customer's always right, well, that's nonsense. Mm-hmm. Whoever said that doesn't really understand retail. The customer is often right, not always. But you've got to have all of those 3 different elements working properly and together: customers, staff and suppliers. When you get that right, you've got a successful business.
And I think too, when you take the pressure, so obviously a workplace has a feel, and what I've noticed, so my regular is Burley. When you walk in there doesn't have that sense of, quick, time is money, go, go, go. That doesn't exist, as opposed to your competitors who are in a few doors of either side type thing. You know, like I was in one of your competitors' shops when they first opened, and there was an old guy came in, like an old farmer type guy, and he was going through all these sanding belts, and he couldn't find the one he needed. And he said to me, "Oh, I've got an old vintage Makita thing, and the belts are this size, and the guy at the front won't help me." And I'm like, "Oh," I said, "Okay, well, have you got the part number?" And he goes, "No, but I know this." So I Googled it, and I found him the Makita part number, and I said, "Well, go up and ask him." He went up to the counter, and the guy said, "No, mate, we don't do that. If it's not on the shelf, I can't help you." And I was like, "Wow." So he came back and he told me, and I said, "Oh, well, look, here, just take this next door on Monday. Take that part number. That shouldn't be an issue. If they make it, they can order it." And then, I had gone into the Trade Tools Burley soon after, and the guy I met in there, I went in there to buy a little grinder, and it was a pure thing of, I ended up learning the difference between this type of grinding wheel and the one that's got the bevel that comes up, and this is for that, and this is for that. All a reflection of total separate cultures where that guy just was a box mover. That's all his job is there. I want to move those boxes, and someone else is here to interact and create a reason for me to come back. So, and it's funny, like you said, some things some people just don't get.
Well, I know what company you're talking about, and it's a very successful business, but it's not a business that I would like to own.
Yeah.
Because they're only in it for the money, and they're only in it to move as much stock as possible. And I don't think that's doing a public service. And I think Trade Tools does a public service. And the example that you made is an excellent one. Who knows who that man is? He could be a billionaire.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And if he's got a belt sander and he wants a belt for it, any tool company should be able to solve that problem. And we certainly can. And I mean, small fish are sweet. I never mind if someone comes in and spends $15. And every retailer knows, and everyone with any business now knows, that as you sell smaller stuff, the margins increase. So we don't mind, spending a bit of time with someone if they just want to spend a few dollars. That's part of what we do. And sometimes they'll walk back in next week and spend 10 grand.
Yeah.
But one of the major differences between the company that you refer to and ours is that, to my knowledge, the people in that company, our major competitor, are paid individual commission rates. So they're paid on their own personal sales. And that's why places like JB Hi-Fi, they hover at the door and they try and give you their card and make sure you get their name. So if you go back to buy it, you always speak to them. In a Trade Tools store, they're paid on the commission of the store. So everyone works as a team. And that'll always be the way it is.
Very different approach.
Totally different.
Totally, yeah.
Totally different, yeah. And you can sense it when you walk in. That's why they don't hover at the door. They're always busy. And if some people like doing displays, let them go and do displays. If someone likes working at the counter, let them work at the counter. Get everyone doing the things that they're good at. And so they work as a team. Otherwise, you get that situation where everyone's trying to sort of crawl all over each other for sales. It's a dog-eat-dog mentality. And that will never, ever be the case at Trade Tools.
And I remember one thing I read too is you mentioned that, and obviously it shows because it's so competitive, is that there's very small margins on the product. Well, power tools, I guess, essentially. It's very, very tight. So it makes it hard then. You've got to turn over a lot of product because of those margins being so small, which then you get guys turning up next door who are trying to take a customer off you for $1.50 cheaper.
The margins aren't quite as bad as they seem on the surface because, like the electrical industry in general, fridges, washing machines and whatever, the margins up front are quite small. Sometimes there is no margin up front, but we rely upon our rebates from our suppliers to supply us with margin.
Right,
and that is the case in many instances. I mean, even the car industry is going that way.
See, I've never understood that rebate model. Like, I know the electrical wholesalers, they rely on that from Clipsal and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
But I suppose when you come from the other trade service world, it's like, well, here's my product. If I can put 20% on the price or whatever, plus my time to install it, job done, move on. But that's a far more complex way when you're working on rebates, isn't it?
Well, you have to see it from a supplier's point of view. On one of the world's largest tool companies, I won't say the name, but I know the president. He's Japanese, and I said to him years ago, quite naively, why are you so keen to make sure that all of your dealers make a profit? And he said something I'll never forget. He said, because I like to get paid. And one of the reasons that the industry, such as this one and many others, has been structured the way it is that even though the margins are low at the front, there is some margin at the back paid either quarterly or half yearly, so that at least the dealer is getting some margin in order to run his business. There are a great many retailers that will just carve prices to the bone right up until the moment they go bankrupt. And I remember years ago, I was shown a cartoon that hung on the side of a workshop in Sydney, where it showed a derelict man sat on a park bench, drinking out of a bottle out of a brown paper bag, and he was dressed in rags. And he was chatting to a young guy, and the caption underneath him read, "I don't know why I went broke, I was always the cheapest."
That's a really good,
I know.
good caption, that.
Never forgot that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that is really good. And it's frustrating, especially from the service industry. And I see it too. We've got customers, 20 years loyalty. You get a new projects manager comes in, and all of a sudden he says, "Oh, well, this guy on a $20,000 job, the job was $500 cheaper." And you're like, profit's not a dirty word. Profit means I can support you. Profit means I answer the phone. Profit means I keep going. Profit means everyone's happy. For $500, that's not a smart decision.
I think you can drill down a bit further than that. If someone's making excessive profit, then they don't deserve your business.
Yep.
But if your profit is reasonable and your service is good and everything about it is fair, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
You know, and businesses do need to make some sort of profit in order to stay in business, be able to weather bad times, and in order to expand.
Yeah.
And if you don't do that, you end up going to the wall.
Yeah.
You just do. And a lot of people don't seem to understand that. And we always think, and I've had this philosophy for years, that 90% of our customers are reasonable, honest, hard-working people.
Yeah.
There is that 10% that spend their entire life trying to chisel, trying to, make sure people do worse than them. They try and play life as a game in which they wish to win and create a lot of losers. And that 10% of customers, we can afford to lose.
Yeah.
Like one came in to me years ago. I was standing next to an old colleague of mine who I'm still friends with, and he was a trade tools guy. And that was when my old company, Glenford's, was still trading. And they went bankrupt, actually. They were sent bankrupt in 2011, purely through poor management. And the woman actually said to my colleague, she wanted a price on the Makita power tool. And he said, it was $145. And she said, "I can get it round at Glenford's for $139. And my colleague said, "Okay, do they have one in stock?" And she said, "No." And my colleague said, "Well, $139 is my price when I haven't got one in stock." Therein lies a lesson,
Yeah. But you mentioned you're retired. You just come in to oversee the...
I'm the landlord.
Yeah. So the succession plan, where to? What keeps happening? Or how do you, as... I know you said you don't build empires, but you've built something special and it's big. How do you make sure it runs the way you would want it to run onwards and
Well,
upwards?
businesses never run themselves. And we've got family members working here. There's my daughter working downstairs in charge of marketing. We have 5 other directors. The one that out of those that has been here the least is our Chief Financial Officer. He's only been here 15 years. I say only, and I smile when I say it. The rest have been here for 20 years plus. And they all know the inside and out. They know this business inside out. They've all come up through the ranks. And so we do have quite a lot of people up here that know this business really well. And we do have in head office here, most of the people that work up here in the management team are also shareholders. So they've got skin in the game.
Yeah.
So if I drop dead tomorrow, I think it would continue on as it is, maybe with a few changes. Yeah. I'll just make sure I keep them on the straight and narrow and they don't forget what our principles are, Yeah. Never an easy thing,
Yeah, I can imagine too, because it's, especially when you built it, you didn't walk into it.
Yeah, but I built it with the help of a lot of other people,
Yeah.
I'll never forget that.
Yeah.
And they've been rewarded because of it.
everyone wins. Just because.
I mean, Trade Tools does very well. That's no secret, you know. Yeah. But we do it because we follow old-fashioned business principles that work.
And it's probably like asking a parent which kid's their favourite. Do you have a favourite brand of the power tool range? Is there one that's got... I know years ago...
Yeah, I do.
You do? Yeah. Are you allowed to say it, or will that upset too many people?
Upset too many people. I don't want to upset my suppliers, you know.
I remember years ago, I mean, because back in the 90s even, there was your hardware shops, and then there was specialty shops. Like if you wanted to buy a drill, you went to a motor rewinder. They used to sell Makita and Metavos and all the rest of it. Yeah. And then would it be fair to say that you were one of the first that brought all of that under one roof?
Yeah, in Queensland we were.
Yeah. It wasn't really happening before then.
Yeah. I mean, years ago, the hardware stores they ruled the roost in many ways, and there were some good hardware companies too that are no longer here, which is a shame. The competition in the hardware end of the industry has been virtually wiped out by Bunnings, of course. Yeah. And, you know, people in the old days used to go to hardware stores to buy a new electric drill or a new miter saw or whatever. And then tool specialists started to come on the scene. And it was also at the same time when power tool companies started to make more new and innovative products. Yeah. And air tools started to come on the market. And it started to become a little bit too complicated for the average hardware store to be able to get their head around it. Yeah. So you needed a specialist. And I mean, you can walk into Bunnings today, and Bunnings are a good hardware company. You know, I don't take that away from them. And you can buy a Makita cordless drill for sure. But if you want to go back and buy a switch, because the switch is worn out after 2 years, they won't know what to do. I mean, they will refer you to Trade Tools. Yeah. And we have them under the counter, you know. Yeah. Oh, okay. So you can come into us and you can buy the stuff that you need. So actually Bunnings are very good for us because they send customers to us all the time. Yeah, 2 hard baskets, send it over the road. In fact, my own wife has gone in there to buy something at Bunnings and I said, go to Trade Tools. You know, and we didn't have what she wanted. Otherwise she would have come here in the first place. So they do it all the time. So, you know, we do warranties for the hardware companies. We warranty agents for everything we sell. Yeah, I mean, we're a specialist and that's what we do. 90% of what we sell, you can't buy in a normal hardware company. Yeah, definitely. You just can't, you know. Well, and also the quality spectrum. You know, it's very hard. Like Bunnings, everything tends to be cost driven. But then if you're like, I want a better hammer, I want a better saw, that then leads you to a Trade Tools where you can give me the option to go better, which a lot of hardware is just volume, just turn over the product. But they don't pretend to be specialists. No, I mean, and I say this to people that they say about Bunnings, especially about Bunnings. I say, okay, if you're an electrician, you go to your electrical wholesaler. Yeah. You go to Bunnings if your wholesaler is closed on a Sunday. Exactly right. If you're a plumber, you will go to your plumbing supplier. Yep. You generally won't go to Bunnings. No. And that's always been the way. Yeah. So the hardwares are there to really look after the home user, DIY people, and the occasional tradesman. Yeah. If they try and get into the trade seriously, they never be able to do it. In fact, Bunnings have virtually run up the white flag, and they've actually started their own tool company called TKD, Toolkit Depot. They've opened their first pilot stores in WA. Wow, I didn't know that. Yeah. So but, separate store to Bunnings? Separate store. They virtually said they can't get into the tool industry. They've got to open a separate company, which is strange because they already own a separate specialist tool supplier in the name of Blackwoods, which is an old, well-established company. But they decided to open their own TKD tool stores. But they've already advertised the fact that the people that work there don't get paid commission, and it's just going to be another kind of a Bunnings entity. It's going to be a tool company run by Bunnings. It won't be a family business like this one that is, you know, seriously into this stuff. And on the Bunnings front, I saw a comment made once where you said you'd never sell. So no doubt, be it Bunnings or any of the other big ones, because is it Total Tools and someone else is owned by Bunnings or Medicash? Total Tools is owned by Metcash, which is Metcash, IGA. Right. Yeah. Right. They bought it a year or so ago. Yeah. So, and that's no matter what offer comes, it's like, no, we're not here for the payout. We're here to keep doing what we're doing. Well, I won't say we'd never sell. I think we'd have to have all the shareholders on board. I mean, I'm retired, so you know, I do what my fellow shareholders decided to do, but I don't think we'd ever sell. We'd toy with the idea of going public, putting it on the stock market.
Well, even that.
I don't know if there'd be too many restrictions and it would, tie us up too much. I don't know.
Yeah.
We thought about it and we haven't done much about it, tell you the truth.
But if you don't need to, if you're in such a stable position, you're debt-free, you're growing organically, and you've got
we double our size every 10 years on average.
So even with the property prices going through the roof, like if you were to buy this, today, that I'd hate to think what the land value here would be astronomical. It doesn't derail because like you mentioned before, there's the housing, the income ratio to property prices is getting bigger. It's still feasible to keep pushing through, even though a block of land in Burleigh is going to be so expensive now as to 10 years ago. It doesn't derail any progress.
It makes things a bit harder. I mean, this building we paid, it owes us about $12.5 million, and I've got a cash offer sitting in my desk of over twice that.
Wow.
And we said no. Our Burleigh building is a good example. We bought that, I think, 2 years ago, because we used to rent down there, and we paid $3.9 million for it. It's just been revalued at $5.9 million. So property prices have gone nuts.
Yeah.
They haven't gone up as much in the regions, which is good, and we're looking in the regional areas to buy real estate at the moment. Yeah. We're currently looking at Townsville, Rocky and Mackay. Yeah, and Ballina, of course.
It seems to be more value and less of those big spikes and troughs.
Yeah, that's right. You do get more value. Yeah. I mean, we were looking around Ballina and Lismore, but we couldn't find anywhere that didn't flood. And fortunately, the building that we nearly bought down there, turned out that it never flooded. In the last flood, it went under. So good thing. So we dodged a bullet there,
Yeah.
So that's the plans for Trade Talks. We're going to continue up and down the coast.
Well, Greg, you've answered all my questions. You've shot through the list and...
Well, I hope I've given you something to
You've given me plenty.
Work with.
No, that's a great story. It's a really good story. And it's refreshing to find someone that's not obsessed with continuous growth at all costs.
Well, the thing is,
detriment to people.
I mean, I don't want to sound like a screaming greenie, but in many ways, growth has killed our world, hasn't it?
Yeah.
There's only so much growth you can have before ecologies start collapsing, and I think we're seeing that now.
Yeah.
And whereas I'm not totally on the side of the greenies, and I think they got some of their figures wrong, and I'm not so sure about global warming either. There's two sides to that story.
Yeah.
Without any doubt, the world is getting warmer, but it's actually getting back to the temperatures that we enjoyed maybe 600 or 700 years ago, because we came through a mini ice age. But the one thing I do agree with is that we've trashed our world.
Yeah.
We've got seas of plastic. We've made a mess.
Yeah.
And so this continual, pursuing of growth has got to come to an end at one point.
Yeah.
And, we acknowledge that here. We're not out to just grow this business so we're the biggest and the best. We're out to be part of society, to do a job, to, as I've quoted before, partake in the world's second oldest industry, to supply tools to people that need it, and to do the right thing by our staff and suppliers. And I think we do that. And if we grow slower than our competitors, well, that's the way it is. I'm happy with that,
Yeah. Well, it's a win-win for everyone. Like you've proved that everyone can take a piece of that pie without having to kill and destroy the competition left and right of you.
There's plenty of business for everyone.
No, that's great.
That's the history of Trade Tools.
Yeah, I'm glad I got it down on tape. No, that's really good. No, that's good, and it's good. Like you've got your daughter that works here as well. You've built something for people. You've kept the soul, but you also have the success. You've managed to do both, which is it's a rare achievement.
Well, one of my neighbours had a very successful retail business, actually with 17 stores, and he sold it to a large conglomerate, and they completely wrecked it in 3 years.
And what is the go? That happens all the time, doesn't it?
I think too many, suits and corporates come in and think they know better than the founder, and then they make a lot of mistakes. And the first people that leave is their customers, followed by their staff, followed by their suppliers, and then they've got no business left.
And it happens all the time. And even the big corporate takeovers, like you see a company will come in and buy a brand to shut it. And what was that all about?
Well, you can't learn business out of a book, can you? It's like learning to swim out of a book,
Yeah, exactly right. You can't.
It's all very well until you get in the water and then you find you can't do it,
Well, if you are going to read the book, understand that you're still going to have to learn when you go out and jump in the pool.
Yeah.
Because that's what I think it is. They get puffed up with this textbook arrogance, and it's like you at some point you've got to listen to the guy who did it, who's done it, who understands it, Often the person...
Yeah, but they don't.
They don't.
They don't listen.
And what I find odd is it's not the Model T. This isn't the first time. You can look back and see this happen last year, the year before, the year. There's always an example of this reoccurring circle. But there's just the blinkers are on, full steam ahead.
Well, I learned a few things from my dad. He died in 2005. He was in his 80s. And he was a character, actually, a good salesman too. And he knew this industry quite well. And years ago, he used to employ reps. And what he wanted to make sure was that they weren't going to cause a mess. And so if he decided to give a guy a job, and the guy usually, because he was a rep, was going to get a company car, my father would always accompany that man out to his car before he offered him the job. And he'd see what condition his car was in.
Because if you kept it well.
And if it was a mess, he knew that's exactly how he was going to run the company car.
Yeah.
And he always had a saying, there is no such thing as a successful, untidy business.
Yeah, that's
And
true.
I never forgot that, right?
Yeah.
And I've said to people, if you show me a successful, untidy business, I'm keen to see one, because I've never seen one, right? And I have my own funny little quirks. If anyone comes to see me for a job, I'll make sure they come down and they'll sit down, right? And we'll do what we have to do, have a chat and whatever. If they're going to be a salesperson, I've very often ask them to tell me a joke. You'd be amazed how many salespeople can't tell you a joke.
Okay.
If they've got a sense of humour, they can tell you a joke. Even if it's a bad one, I don't care. You know,
Yeah,
some of my best jokes I've heard at interviews from people that I put them on the spot, you know. And I want to see what happens when you put them under pressure. But the next thing I check is, when they get up to leave, I see if they put their chair back in place.
Yep.
If they do, it shows they have a tidy, ordered mind.
Yep.
If they don't, they've got no place working at Trade Tools, because I will spend my entire life tidying up after them.
Coming up, yeah.
No such thing as a successful, untidy business.
That's a good point. And you've just nailed in on a few basic, subtle body language.
They're little windows into the brain of the person you're about to employ.
Yeah. And that obviously comes with time. You know, you've just nailed in on those things with time. And yeah, that's just experience, isn't it?
That's right.
It just comes
That's
down
like
to
my
experience.
first boss in London when I was 20, that the estate agent said to me. He said, if you say good morning to a lawyer, confirm it in writing. And I always do. So if it's not in writing, not interested. So when you go into a trade tool store and you ask for a quote, it's over $50, they'll pull out a quote card and they'll write it on the quote card for you. So you walk away with that quote card and the price is on the back. You know why? Because if they come back a week later, they always remember a lower price than the one they were quoted.
Yeah.
They never remember a higher price. Isn't that strange?
Yeah, that's odd.
So we
isn't
say,
it?
you got
always
your quote
try.
card? Oh, yeah. Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. It was, you know.
Yeah.
We do that all the time.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And they also walk out with a quote card. You can walk into any of my competitors and walk out without a quote card, without a card. So they go home and we're the only one they got a card and a price on. So where are they going to go back to? So all these funny old things, we make sure that our guys do them, you know. They don't want to do them, that's great, as long as they want to work elsewhere, because they won't work here.
And do you do the pop in? Is it like a thing of that, you know, you'll pop in down at Nerang and just turn up and...
Yep.
So that's a...
Do it all the time.
Really?
Yeah. I went down to Burley the other day and gave me a yoga lesson. We had a yoga school in the middle of the store, and there was customers walking around us all laughing. I was trying to teach the boys some yoga, because they were trying to get... Both of them had bad backs, so I thought, I'll fix that. So those are the sorts of things we do. If you can make your staff laugh, you know, you've engaged them already.
Yeah.
If you can engage your staff, you get them on side, you know, that's what you need.
Bob Ansett said that he got told when he was young, you go into business for one or two reasons, either to make a profit or to enjoy yourself. And if you can do the two...
Yeah, that's right. I've never heard that, yeah. I think I enjoy myself more than I make a profit sometimes. Especially at these margins. All right.
Oh, no, that's great. Thank you so much for that. I
Pleasure.
appreciate your time. Thanks, everyone, for listening to the show. I hope you enjoyed it. If you do know anyone that you think would like it, please feel free to share this episode or any of the past episodes. It is the only way the show will grow, and your listenership and support is truly appreciated. If you'd like to know more about the show, please head to bumpinginto.com.au, where you'll also find the complete backlog of episodes and a list of coming shows. Thanks very much for listening, and I'll catch you on the next episode.